In this topic, we're going to look at network connectivity. So think about it. You have Microsoft Azure, you have workloads, you have servers, you have cloud services, you have web applications in the cloud. And then you also have resources on premises. So how do we get those two to talk to each other? So one thing I haven't mentioned to you previously, but I do want to kind of give you a quick note on this, that there's a great session on this where we've derived some of this high-level overview that I want to discuss with you. But on Channel 9, there was a series a while back called Azure IS for IT Pros. And the owner of the product group actually went through this in depth for an hour. So if you don't get enough of it here, you'll definitely want to check that out. But the whole idea here is to think about how we get that connectivity from our on-premises through that network to the network up in Azure. So in the picture that we have here, we're going to look at kind of the two basic options of how we connect. And first of all, we're going to talk about, where am I there we go. I was looking, it was kind of a blue, I couldn't see that. So we have, first of all, it would be like a point-to-site connectivity would be an option. And the thing to consider from an architectural perspective is why we would do this one. So we're going to look at three options: point-to-site or P2S, or site-to-site, or else doing express route. So that's what we really want to differentiate between these from workloads. So on the workloads, so why would we do this? This is going to be for things like developers, proof of concepts, or very small. This is not something you're doing for a large-scale deployment, but I have a workstation. I need to connect this up to Azure so we can do a point-to-site. So I need to have a client on my workstation that allows me to connect up to that environment.
So essentially, when we're doing the point-to-site connectivity, we're going to go ahead and go generate a self-signed cert. So this doesn't work with a CA. But we can set up a self-signed certificate. We can generate that and put it in a portal for these point-to-site connections. And then what we do is we have the clients download what Mark said, the VPN client. So it's just like any of the typical client VPN software that you've used in the past, only this one talks specifically to Azure. So once you have that installed, when you connect via that VPN, you'll have connectivity just from that workstation up to the cloud.
Okay, great points. So next, we'll go to the next level, and now not looking at just going from one workstation connecting to the cloud. Now we want to do a site-to-site connection, right? So in this case, we're going to need a gateway, right, to make that connectivity from a on-premises site to a network up in Azure. And the type of workloads we look for here on the right are going to be things like for large organizations, enterprises, and you need to connect to Azure Compute specifically.
Yeah, and again, so essentially what we're creating here with this site-to-site tunnel that Mark's talking about is an IPsec tunnel. It's no different from any other IPsec tunnel that you've seen in the past. So we have an on-premise, he mentioned gateway, we have an on-premises component that's deployed there. Now that can be either Windows RRAS, so we can use 2012 RRAS to be that endpoint, or we can use a hardware device. Now there's a list of known workable devices up there, all the things from Cisco and Juniper and all the normal networking gear. But essentially, if it supports an IPsec tunnel, we can support it there. There's a pre-shared key that's involved. We just have to make sure the keys are in sync. But yeah, once we have that configured, then we can establish site-to-site connectivity. Now, one thing I'll point out that customers and out in the field that we see is we have to do a little bit of planning around this. We can't just willy-nilly take an IP range that's on premises and then start connecting it to Azure, because the reason is we have to plan those address spaces. This is just networking under the cover, so if we have an address conflict, like if we happen to use the same subnet range that we have in Azure, we're going to have conflicts and problems. So that should be thought out and planned out whenever you're doing these site-to-site.
Good point. So, Kayla, I'm just curious, from your perspective, how much of this are you seeing with your customers, in doing either just a point-to-site or a site-to-site? Are you seeing much of that?
Yeah, a point-to-site is typically used for just developers. So if we have, and just like what you said, sometimes it's a POC, but most of the time it's developers who just need access to one specific thing. But site-to-site, generally, once the application's up there proven and we want to set up a permanent connection kind of thing, then we'll go with a site-to-site or an express route. Express route, the cost benefit is, it's much more expensive. So that's kind of a con about it, but it gives you much better connectivity and much more speed. We have two different levels of site-to-site, so we can do 100 meg or 200 meg, but we can go up to gig. So if your application demands a high bandwidth usage, you're going to probably look towards the ExpressRoute connection as opposed to a typical site-to-site IPsec.
Yeah, so lately I've been seeing quite a few customers, considering the ExpressRoute, and typically kind of from a security perspective, right? Because you're thinking about you're going over a kind of a tunnel connection that's private connection from my corporate network up to the cloud. And what type of providers are you seeing with that? Who else providing this? And
is this with ExpressRoute?
ExpressRoute, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's all the normal players. So I think Verizon,
Yeah.
Level 3, and all these different providers are out there. So
AT&T.
there's definitely some limitations around which ones those are, but you basically have to set up an agreement with those network service providers in order to pull that off.
Yep.
One other thing I wanted to mention about this and just kind of draw out here is we have this concept of being able to do a VNet to VNet connection, which some people typically don't grasp right away. And what that means is, so if we had VNet 1 here, and this could be in Azure or on-prem, let's do everything in Azure here once, but if we had a VNet 2, and then we had VNet 3, and let's say this is maybe in Asia, and maybe this is in Australia, and maybe this is in the UK. Right, so our Azure data centers, these are all Azure data centers, we can actually establish this kind of connectivity between, and we can even do this. So we can build these, using the same technology that we do with site-to-site, we can build these tunnels, which essentially is what these are, between these different places to provide connectivity between them. And then we can also have on-prem back here connecting up through there too. So that's really cool, but the thing is, you got to remember the restrictions. We can't do multi-hops. We can't have on-prem then connect to this through this like that. We can have that connection that I just showed right there. We could build this, but we can't have it bounce through here and be routed through this VNet right now.
So it's kind of like a one-to-many relationship.
That's correct, yes.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to point that out because it provides a great way to connect different Azure data centers if you have your resources global.
Yep, and a final point that I want to mention too is that when you do ExpressRoute, another thing that's a good advantage is that you actually get access to all the Azure services, right? So that's a great point as well.
Yep.
So there you have it, folks. There's an overview of network connectivity with Azure.